We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all Aboriginal people across Turtle Island. Members of Council, any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none. The purpose of our meeting and confirmation of notice is what I'm going to read first. So the Planning and Development Department of the Town of LaSalle is in receipt of an application for a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Philip and Pamela Bazaire regarding a rezoning as a result of a condition of consent file B09-2023 to sever a surplus dwelling from a farm operation at 2807 Front Road. The retained farm will be rezoned from Agricultural Zone A to a site-specific agricultural zone to prohibit the construction of future dwellings and recognize the undersized lot area. Also, the severed lot where the house is located is currently in Agricultural Zone A and will be rezoned to a site-specific rural residential zone, RR, to recognize the undersized lot area. Pursuant to the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, a notice of public planning meeting dated May 21st, 2024 was placed in local subscribed newspaper at least 20 days prior to the meeting date, a copy of which is attached here to the report, which was dated May 24th, 2024, and contained herein has been prepared to provide the public with pertinent information as to the specifics of the application during the statutory public planning meeting. So we will go to the subject application, and I will have our Manager of Planning and Development, Kristen Bursick, to present.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Mayor and members of Council. I'm just going to share here my screen as I have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to utilize. Okay. So yes, as the Mayor mentioned and introduced, this is a zoning bylaw amendment under File Z03-2023. The location of the property is 2807 Front Road. As you can see up on the screen, it is the property that is highlighted in blue. The parcel, as you can see, is in an area surrounded by farm land or agricultural uses, and there is obviously a concentration of homes and buildings along Front Road. In fact, there seems to be a lot, which is with a residential dwelling on it, that's been severed off previously from the parcel. And just below that parcel that I'm mentioning is where the residential dwelling for 2807 Front Road is located. So as the Mayor mentioned, on July 19th, 2023, at the Committee of Adjustment meeting, the applicants were provided conditional approval for their severance of a surplus dwelling on the agricultural farm parcel, and that was under File B09-2023. And the provincial policy statement does recognize such types of severances in the agricultural area when, for instance, agricultural parcel contains a dwelling or dwellings sometimes that are surplus in the needs of the farmer. So whether the farmer has their home base of operations on the same parcel and there's 2 houses or more, or their home base of operations can be on another farm elsewhere within the regional vicinity, and this is surplus. They don't wish to be landlords, they wish to be farmers. The area where the house is located on the farm is already not farmable because it's landscaped, has its own driveway and whatnot, so they'd prefer to sever it off and not have to worry about being landlords, and they would just like to be farmers. So that's often the case for such type of severance requests. And as a requirement under provincial policy statement, the remaining farm, after you sever the home off, cannot permit any future dwellings to be built on it. So as such, we have such applications like this zoning amendment before us to prohibit any future dwellings from being built on the retained farm. So up on the screen, you'll see I've just made slight amendments to the drawing. And to kind of give you an idea, the total land as a whole, as it stands today, without the severance, is 24 hectares, or just over 59 acres. The surplus dwelling lot, which I've colored in as red up on the screen, will account to about 0.23 hectares, or just slightly over half an acre. And the vacant retained farm lot will be about 23 hectares, or slightly over 56 acres. And so the current zoning of the land as a whole is agricultural A. And the proposed zoning for the surplus dwelling lot is rural residential zone with site exception 1. And that's in the cross-hatched. I know it might be hard to see, but you'll see the RR-1 up on the screen. And that is due to once the land is being severed, it's actually slightly undersized for what the zoning permits for an RR zone. So I have here that it'll maintain a 0.23 hectare lot area compared to what the zoning would require of 0.6 hectares. And similarly, the retained farm parcel will also have an undersized lot area, which is why we're proposing the A-4 zone. Also to recognize that undersized lot area where the bylaw requires 40 hectares, and here we will result in 23. The reason being that it can be supported even though it's undersized is because the fact that, again, the area where the home is currently located, it's already landscaped, it's not being farmed, there's no change or negative effects to the farming ability of the lands due to the severance. So with that, I'll go to the recommendation that this report be received, and there's two options: that if issues arise at this public planning meeting that cannot be immediately resolved, a summary of issues along with a final recommendation of the application will follow by way of a future planning report to council. However, if all issues are resolved at this public planning meeting, the zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward to council's consideration at a subsequent council meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of council, do you have any questions at this time? Councillor Renaud?
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I just wanted to mention that when this issue got mailed out, I had a few residents reach out to me, and I was able to contact our planning department. They explained everything very, very well, and I appreciate that. I forgot to ask one question at the time, though. Is there a reason that this has to be done right now? Are we, is the proponent looking at selling the home off in the future and wants to keep it separate from the farm? I'm just wondering what triggers something like this, because I've never seen anybody willingly close off land to future development.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have the answer if they're looking to sell immediately. However, the answer that I do have, without directing it to the applicants, is that they do have conditions they need to complete as a result of the severance. And those do lapse on July 19th, 2025. So if they don't get it completed before that date, all the work they've put into the severance thus far would be null and void. So, you know, if I was the applicant, I'd want to work towards completing those conditions, and this is just one of them. It's condition 5 out of 6, actually. But they may be better able to answer your other question.
Councillor Carrick? If you'd like to, it's up to you. Come on forward, have a seat there.
So your question is, why would somebody do this? It's actually very common. As a matter of fact, this is we work about 350 acres across 5 different farm properties and across 3 different municipalities. And this is the 3rd time that we do this. In 2011, we severed a house from a farm in LaSalle. In 2018, we severed a house in Amherstburg, and then now this one. And it's really just a question of, if you're farming, and you're not living in the house that's on that farm, you typically rent it. Being a landlord is a distraction from the farming business. It's not your core business is farming. And then the other aspect of it is that if you can sever a residential property from a farm and sell it, then the capital that comes from the sale of that house becomes something you can reinvest in your farm business. The house that, on this particular property, has been for sale in anticipation of completing the conditions for the severance. And as a matter of fact, we also have the farm property for sale. And again, that becomes a question of, if you can sell something, gives you an opportunity to use that capital for other farm purchases. And it's, it gets to be just a business thing within the context of farming. Does that answer all that
Absolutely, yeah.
stuff
No,
for you?
I didn't look to be invasive or anything into your business. I was just curious. So it's more about the severance of getting the house away from the farm than it is anything else, and that makes good sense. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Carrick?
Just a couple of things. So the Committee of Adjustments basically signed off in agreement with this, my understanding. And so secondly, I'm not exactly sure where the farm is. Is it outside the sewer area? So it's outside the sewer area, so the fact that we sever it, developable or not, it's outside the sewer area, so it's not going to happen as far as that goes. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, we are supposed to have a delegate. Do we know if she's on Zoom? She is. So we have Patricia McGorman Rhodes on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, and yourself?
Very good. So you have the floor. Go ahead and share your thoughts or concerns.
Okay. I was told that I'm allotted 5 minutes, so I will try to cover. I won't be able to cover everything that's regarding this, but I will try some things. I am a concerned citizen, and part of the concern is our loss of agricultural lands. So, in part of that is our ability to engage in a diversity of agricultural activities. So, when the house is severed, and both, according to the report, the house to be severed with the small lot, it's an undersized lot, and the retained farmland is also an undersized lot as well, according to your own policy statement and zoning bylaw. And primarily attending today to state my opposition to the proposed severances. They are not in compliance, as I stated, and as reported in your report to council. And also, the concern is that when the lands are zoned that they can no longer have a future development, council is then limiting future farmers from having the opportunity to live on that parcel of land without the ability to develop another home on there. It may be a diversity of agriculture, and the soils here are rich. We have a wonderful growing condition, and agriculture is an important industry. It's according to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, the agricultural industry generates approximately $47 billion in Ontario a year. So that's nothing to be flip about, or to look at the short-term gains of an individual. I do not know these folks. I want to state that very clearly. But my concern is for the agricultural long-term use and diversity for upcoming generations. We're making a very short-term decision if we approve something that may affect generations to come. And also, it appears on this the diagrams that there's actually 2 farm parcels and not 1. So I would think that would be very important in recording for future reference, that the railway divides the parent lot in 2, so there would be 2 parcels accordingly to that. And also you'd be creating another driveway to access. And also that there is what appears to be the original farmstead on the property that's already been severed. So this would be a second severance off this originalish parcel of land. So perhaps the planner, forget her name here, is that Christina Brisick, could clarify that when the severance, the previous severance was done. And I'll just add that Front Road is a busy road. Adding potentially more traffic in there by creating another residential lot isn't very conducive to, I would think, long-term good planning. So if Ms. Brisick could please answer that question about the severance, previous severance, and the 2 parcels of land, that would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to go over a few of the comments made, and maybe you could kind of address all of them, plus the 2 that she had. She's concerned of loss of agricultural lands, but in this circumstance, are we not preserving it as agricultural land? And it will not be developable, so it will stay as agricultural. And then I understand what she's saying about not being in compliance, but even if we were to keep the parcel whole, it's still not in compliance, correct? Okay, I just want to be sure, because I thought that's how I read it, and I want to be sure. Access to the property was a comment she made as well, and there is a separate access at this point in time for this property away from that residential one, right? So we're not adding traffic or changing driveway access, correct? Okay. So if you could answer the other questions, I'd appreciate that.
Most certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As to the previous severance off the farm that I kind of alluded to up on the screen, I don't actually have the history on that. It was definitely previous to my time. It seems like the owner may have the answer, if you'd like him to interject an answer.
We purchased the 59-acre parcel from, her name was Lil Danaher. And when she had originally purchased a 38-acre parcel with the home that we're trying to sever now, that house was on the 38-acre parcel. While she owned the 38 acres, the adjacent 20-acre parcel became available for sale. And LaSalle's policy at the time was if you owned the adjacent farmland, the town would consider requests for surplus dwelling severances favorably. And so she bought the adjoining farm, she severed the house that's currently owned by a guy named Riley McGraw, who runs McGraw Tree Services. And all that happened before we purchased the farm in 2010.
Thank you. And the other question, please.
Yes, so the fact that the parcel does appear to be 2 separate lots, that's because of the railway that actually kind of splits the property in, I guess, a visual way. Legally, it is all one parcel. It does not create 2 separately conveyable lots. So they are conjoined legally and are joined for a matter of legal matters.
Thank you. And then just to kind of go back to the conversation about it possibly being short-sighted by deeming this agricultural only for the future, the comment Councillor Carrick made about it being outside of the urban boundaries, what is realistically the time that could ever change?
That's a really good question. We were recently at some countywide meetings discussing the updates to the OP coming about, and LaSalle does not have any plans for any growth of our urban boundary. And I think that plan is until 2040, 50? Sometime. Yeah, about a 25-year outlook. So not anytime soon, I would say.
So it's fair to say that even if we were to do this, we're really not changing what would be able to happen on that parcel of land because it's just not developable. So we're preserving it as agriculture, which I know is very important to a lot of people in our community as we are losing that land. I think it is a great way for us to focus on another area of town that we know isn't going to be developed and preserve that as our agricultural area. So I don't know if you missed any other points. I know she brought up a few others, but I think we've covered all of them. Ms. McGorman Rhodes, are you still online?
Yeah, oh, I thought somebody else had muted me. Yes, I'm still online.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, I guess I got a little sidetracked there. I had to pull my car over to get hooked up online. So the primary concern is that person farming will not be able to live on those lands into the future, right? So you're creating an environment where the future farm owner cannot be a custodian on site, right? Living on site. So that is, to me, that is severe looking at long term.
Thank you. I unfortunately do not have a farming background, but I do know of several properties in our municipality that do not have homes on them, that we are farmed by different people. I don't know if you could maybe add to that comment, or administration. I myself don't have that background, but I do know we have several of those properties in the town.
Well, as I said, we own 5 farm properties. We can only live in one spot. So I think it's more common than not to have farm property owned and operated by farmers who aren't resident on the particular farm that, a given farm property. And the trend, of course, within agriculture in Canada is for larger and larger farm operations. When I grew up on a 25-acre farm. You couldn't even begin to think about making a living on a 25-acre farm now, and we're at 345 acres, and it's not uncommon for farmers to own to operate 2,000-3,000 acres. So while I appreciate the individual's concern about the preservation of farmland, that's certainly something that every stakeholder in the farming business shares. I don't think that being resident on a given farm property is actually a requirement.
Thank you very much. Members of council, do you have any other questions or concerns? Councilor Renaud?
Not a concern, just goes back to the information that I got from the planning department on behalf of the other residents. And one of the things that made them the happiest was that this would not be open for development. They wouldn't have to worry about something happening and a set of row houses ending up back there or something. So the residents that I spoke to were actually very much in favor of this because it was preserving farmland and it was blocking any future changes in use. So the people that I spoke to were very positive.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's no other questions, you do have 2 options of the recommendations put before you.
So we can move the one that moves.
Do you want to put your microphone on?
We'll move the option, the one that moves it forward to the next council meeting for approval.
Okay,
Or not the next council meeting, but a council meeting.
right. So the recommendation is that the report of the manager of planning development dated May 24th, 2024 regarding zoning bylaw amendment Z03-2023 be received, and that council report zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward for council's consideration at a subsequent council meeting. Okay? And that's moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. There's no other items on the agenda, so meeting adjourned. Thank you for joining us.